she's a wonderful woman. I think she's a powerful force of good and positive energy.
But you ain't no Elon.
But she also brought us Dr. Oz and The Secret. We have to remember what this lady has done.
She has to be held accountable.
I forgive her, but I mean, cut the The Secret is a particularly egregious offense.
What, you just...
Oh, you don't believe?
You don't believe?
Oh, believe? Believe?
I want to be rich. I am rich.
I imagine myself flying. I can fly. I will beat my wings until I take off.
If the name Oprah makes you instantly think of wisdom, warmth, and free cars, get ready to see that image completely shaken by Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly as they go on a truth-filled rampage. Rogan is throwing out bold opinions like kettlebells. Megyn is cutting through media illusions with precision, and Oprah looks as if someone entered her book club in the middle of a sentence. What exactly do they say that turned the talk show queen's perfectly crafted empire upside down? Get ready, because this takedown is more intense than one of Oprah's famous couch confessions. And it's all happening without a single
I used to love Oprah, like most of us who grew up when we did. And only now did I realize I've been getting spoon-fed propaganda from this woman for years. I always took her little setup packages as gospel. You know, before I was a reporter, I never even thought to question whether Oprah might be intentionally misleading me. Then last night, the dawn came, and I was like, oh my God, she is not a reporter. She's a propaganda.
Imagine standing on a mountain made of kale smoothies, jade eggs, and 27 different spiritual advisors, yet still feeling lost when it comes to basic common sense. Welcome to the peak of Oprah Winfrey's empire, where intuition takes the place of evidence and every issue seems solvable with a quote from a vision board. But that very empire wasn't just questioned by Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly. It was torn apart and left as a smoldering crater of overhyped self-help nonsense.
Rogan is calling out Oprah and Michelle Obama for hypocritical speeches at the DNC. Watch.
She's up there talking about income inequality. Like, hey, lady.
Yeah, I know.
You're rich as like, how is that equal? And also, when Michelle Obama was saying, you know, I think she was saying her mother or grandmother was always suspicious of people who took more than they needed.
Yes.
Like, you are worth so much money.
Take more than they need. The Obamas have 4 mansions.
I mean, it's a bunch of rich people talking about
Rogan didn't come in swinging with fists. No, he arrived holding a steel chair labeled logic. And Megyn Kelly followed behind with a flamethrower marked accountability, creating a scene that felt like tossing a TED Talk into a chipper. IT all started with a glorified cult of Oprah, who for years acted as a nation's emotional GPS, except hers lacked any real signal and just yelled, "Believe in yourself," before steering straight into oncoming traffic. And we all applauded, bought the books, and eagerly sipped the overpriced wellness Kool-Aid infused with moon water and wrapped in pseudoscience, without ever stopping to question a thing.
What's up?
Yeah.
It was one of the more I want to say disturbing, but it was confusing when that was taking hold with people. When I had friends that were telling me that The Secret is real and that they imagined they were going to fulfill these childhood dreams that they had about whatever, being a fucking astronaut, whatever it would be. There's a couple people that I knew that were trying to tell me that The Secret was going to be the thing and that they had a vision board and they had photographs. They put pictures up of the things that they wanted. Like them in front of large crowds and shit. And I'm like, oh boy.
Them in front of large crowds.
This is so not how it works.
But then Joe Rogan, America's favorite cage-fighting philosopher, took one long look at Oprah's kingdom and asked, so no one's going to talk about how this is a high-functioning con game with glitter? And Megyn Kelly didn't hesitate. She dove in headfirst, heels off, earrings off, like she'd been waiting her entire career for the chance to call out this quinoa-coated nonsense.
Did you see the Oprah interview?
No.
She's off the rails.
Yeah,
Off the rails.
I heard about it.
Into fucking wine mom country again.
Wow.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that.
Tim Dillon is the best. Tim Dillon's like, she's saying gypsy curses. What is she saying?
When was the last time Oprah actually spent time hanging out with a working class person in America? She's on her Montecito estate with one of the most beautiful mansions known to man. And that is why she did not follow up with Kamala Harris in response to that stupid gun question with, well, you're on camera saying that you favor mandatory gun buybacks. So how would that work? The Oprah enthusiasm worked when it was
And speaking of nonsense, remember Dr. Oz? Oprah's very own Franken-scientist. Carefully chosen, polished, and promoted, until one day he crawled out of the wellness lab and tried to run for office like a sentient Whole Foods aisle, prompting Rogan to raise a single eyebrow so high it practically achieved orbit as he all but shouted, "This is your guy?" The same guy who pushed raspberry ketones like they were some kind of super serum from Wakanda. And then there's Dr. Phil, the southern fried motivational force whose credentials seem to be whatever Oprah decides they are. And Megyn Kelly didn't hold back, holding up a mirror to Oprah and saying, "You launched a couch therapist whose biggest claim to fame is yelling at teenagers on daytime TV." While Oprah just kept nodding like, yes, healing. But Rogan and Kelly didn't need to shout. They calmly peeled away the layers of endless affirmations to expose a relentless machine of branding, manipulation, and live your truth slogans that always seem to end in a $39 bottle of essential oil. And let's not forget the book club, a literary empire curated by someone who once endorsed The Secret. A book that claims the universe is basically your personal Amazon Prime if you just manifest hard enough. And Rogan was nearly foaming at the mouth saying, "You mean to tell me someone told cancer patients they just need to vibe higher?" And you put that on national television.
Yeah, so let's think of when The Secret came out. I want to say that was like 2006-ish.
2004.
2006.
Nice.
Okay. So 12 years ago, she was 50 years old. How the fuck do you not know when you're 50 years old and worth $1 billion that that's not how it works?
That it's hocus pocus.
Yeah, it's not hocus pocus.
Yeah.
And to sell that to people is crazy. And that's a book that sold, I think I was reading, it sold somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million copies.
Wow.
Is that what it says, yeah?
Jeez.
Megyn didn't just raise an eyebrow. She raised the entire bar of journalism by pointing out that this woman sold Think Your Way Out of Poverty to people who needed real policy, not positivity. And what's even more remarkable is how Oprah managed to rebrand herself as some moral compass, as if she'd become the living conscience of America, despite being the same person who helped build an empire on daytime drama, shouting guests and feel-good fakery, and now wants to be the Dalai Lama brunch. Rogan, eyes wide, couldn't believe it, and basically asked, "Do we all collectively forget this woman used to host I Married My Horse type content in the 90s? But the piece to resistance was Oprah's evolution into a political influencer. Because nothing says, "I'm just like you," quite like a billionaire in her private vineyard telling the public which candidate feels right in her spirit. And Rogan nearly exploded at the absurdity, asking if we're really picking senators the same way we pick throw pillows. While Megyn, arms crossed and voice sharp as a buzzsaw, went for the jugular by pointing out that Oprah has more money than the GDP of some small countries and still tries to act like she relates to economic hardship, when the only inflation she knows is when she hikes the price on her chai-scented candles, which, yes, are very real. And just when it feels like they're done, Rogan leans like he's about to drop the final boss reveal. Oprah thinks she's above media bias, but her entire career has been a perfectly wrapped lesson in emotional propaganda, only disguised in soft cashmere and lit by mood candles.
Trying to shove messaging down my throat of whatever she believes, not what's real. So you remember she did that like kind of factual interview after the quote documentary of Michael Jackson?
Yes.
That was so dishonest.
Yes.
She did not raise any of those accusers' serious compromising facts when she had them right there. Maybe they're telling the truth, maybe they're not. But as a journalist, you have to at least ask. You know, you've got multiple lawsuits against his estate, sir. Might that be an incentive to lie?
Kelly's nodding so hard it looks like her head might fly off, calling out that Oprah isn't just biased. She is the bias of a queen of soft-lit audiences, clapping segments and sob story filtered moral theater, built by a woman who turned crying on command into a full-blown empire. And they weren't about to let her spiritual circle off the hook either, with Eckhart totally mumbling about presence like a man who forgot his own name, and Deepak Chopra spinning out quotes so vague they could double as horoscopes, leaving Rogan nearly falling out his chair at the realization that this entire empire was built on foggy nonsense repackaged as enlightenment. While Megyn practically ignited with frustration, pointing out that Oprah has spent decades selling inner peace like a bath bomb, all while sidestepping the actual policy failures causing real-world suffering. And let's not pretend her reach ends with TV ratings. She's everywhere, in podcasts, documentaries, foundation, and beyond, turning her brand of mystic capitalism into a franchise where every time someone lights a scented candle and scribbles in a gratitude journal while ignoring unpaid rent, Oprah gets another wing added to her estate. And Rogan, just blinking in stunned disbelief, summed it all up by saying, "This woman built a fortune telling people to follow their gut, even when their gut was dead wrong. Because at some point, it's not intuition anymore. It's just gas and denial."
You've got these accusations against him. You had a book that you were supposed to produce about Michael Jackson in the context of litigation where you were required to turn this stuff over, and you lied saying that you didn't have it. And you only got found out because Random House and these other publishers admitted you shopped it to them and turned over the metadata to Michael Jackson's estate. My point is simply, this one accuser was very compromised, and she had him right after the documentary. It aired on HBO right after. Didn't ask a question. Then she gets Meghan Markle. That was another propaganda.
And then came the weight loss saga. Oh, dear God, where Kelly nearly shattered the sarcasm scale, pointing out the absurdity of a woman who spent decades championing body positivity, now promoting weight loss drugs like they're part of a trendy new skincare routine, raising the question, did she finally discover self-love or just a better sponsor? While Rogan started laughing so hard, he sounded like a broken-down motorcycle, calling out the twisted message of "you're perfect just as you are," until the money said otherwise. And the audience, even metaphorically, was losing it. Because the truth is, for all of Oprah's wisdom-soaked brand value, her empire is built on contradictions so massive they deserve their own area code. She's a so-called queen of authenticity who's curated every single moment of her public image since 1986. And while she's hailed as an advocate, let's not forget she once gave airtime to people who claim cancer could be cured with smoothies. She's painted as the moral compass of America, yet somehow always lands on the profitable side of every social movement. And the real kicker is, Rogan and Kelly weren't even saying anything groundbreaking. They just voiced out loud what millions have quietly thought, stripping the sentimentality away and wielding blunt honesty like a chainsaw. And honestly, someone had to. Because for years, Oprah has floated above critique like a wisdom fairy in a private jet, immune to accountability, where questioning her makes you a hater and analyzing her brand means you're not in alignment. But Rogan and Kelly didn't align. They attacked, exposed, and left behind nothing but the smoldering ruins of an empire built on motivational grit.
Is coming from the other way. She had the accusers there, and the accusers may or may not have had this experience with Michael Jackson.
Oh, you're talking about the HBO doc?
Yes. But she failed to bring up prior inconsistencies in their stories that really did compromise their stories. I don't know what happened.
I understand what you're saying.
So
okay,
I'm just saying, as a journalist, which she purports to be,
right,
it was a complete fail.
Right.
And then she committed the same failure with Meghan Markle,
yes,
where she didn't press any of her claims of racism in the royal family. And now we have the ultimate culmination of her journalistic.
Kelly basically mic dropped with the line, "At some point, you're not a media mogul. You're just a billionaire lifestyle blogger with cult status." And Rogan doubled down, saying she sold wellness the way McDonald's sells salads. It looks healthy until you check the ingredients. And that was a roast and a dramatic gotcha moment. No fiery debate. Just two people standing in the glitter-covered ruins of an empire asking, how do we let this go on for so long? Because when you strip away the candles, soft piano music, and slow-motion tears, what's left is an empire built on vibes with very real consequences. And thanks to Rogan and Kelly, that vibe is finally off. Somewhere along the way, they stopped being a media powerhouse and started looking more like a luxury hallucination, and they weren't just pointing fingers. They were tearing down the entire illusion like cheap wallpaper in a mansion of delusion, revealing beneath all that polished wood and vision board sparkle a full-blown self-help Ponzi scheme wrapped in candles. Because Oprah didn't just build a brand. She built a belief system where she's both the prophet and the product line. And the hypocrisy is almost gourmet a woman who tells her to live your authentic truth, while only being photographed under lighting so soft it needs a guardian. Someone who sells vulnerability by the bundle while operating behind layers of PR so dense they make the Pentagon look see-through. And Rogan, almost impressed, muttered that she's got more protection around her image than Fort Knox has around its gold. Stunned by the industrial strength curation of a persona that's been marketed as pure truth.
Oprah didn't help by sort of saying it's cheating. What do you mean it's cheating? It's a drug that helps people control their appetite. How is that cheating? So she was probably on the wrong side of things when she was saying that. And now I think she was sort of forced to admit, because as you say, it's obvious. Somebody like Oprah who's constantly up and down with the weight and hasn't been on the skinnier side for a long time. And then suddenly, after this miracle drug comes out, like, we know. But she's still a spokesperson for Weight Watchers, and I guess she's going to still tell us that the point system is really what's behind the weight.
Kelly didn't blink. She knows spin when she sees it, and Oprah's spin game is world-class, shifting seamlessly from barefoot in the middle emotional healing speeches to charging 5 figures for retreats that amount to high-end group therapy with a side of cucumber water and branded spirituality. And then there's a performance, the tears, the soulful eye contact, the dramatic pauses that stretch longer than most people's attention spans, leaving Rogan, ever the meat and potatoes truth junkie, unable to stay quiet as he asked, is this actual growth or just Oscar-worthy marketing? Because every episode, every special, every tear-eyed pseudo-confession has been one more perfectly placed brick in cathedral of self-worship, disguised as public service. Oprah doesn't just have fans. She has disciples, and the most unnerving part is that they thank her for it. Every layer of manipulation is wrapped in velvet and sealed with gratitude, with people crying just from being in her presence. Of enlightenment now comes with a welcome mat and a product discount code. And Kelly, in full takedown mode, didn't hesitate to cut through it all by saying the only thing worse than fake humility is fake activism. Because one minute Oprah's weeping over injustice, and the next she's gracing a magazine cover in a $12,000 coat, talking about oppression from a private vineyard. And Kelly's face didn't even flinch. Just pure surgical strike energy.
She first hit the scene in like the 1980s, and she was fresh out of Chicago. She was in Chicago for the launch of her national talk show. She was something electric and interesting and authentic, you know? I miss fat Oprah. She was just genuine. Now this thin Ozempic Oprah has lost, along with the pounds, her heart, her sense of authenticity. And what we're getting these days is this cleansed elite billionaire version who wants to scrub the record.
Then came the pivot. Oprah's new era where it's less about books and more about politics. Because why stop at healing souls when you can start shaping elections? And Rogan was stunned, pointing out that she once platformed Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil. And now she's out here playing political kingmaker, which feels like throwing a match and then blaming the fire for burning your house down. And what really raised eyebrows was her signature power move, selective silence. The way she disappears whenever something goes wrong. When one of her experts turns into a public scandal, or when her wellness advice sends people off the deep end, Oprah simply vanishes at NO statements. No accountability. Just a quiet escape to the nearest yurt for reflection. And Rogan and Kelly weren't having it, calling it exactly what it is, strategic vanishing. Because at the end of the day, Oprah isn't held to the same standard as the rest of the media landscape. And why is that? Because she's wrapped her entire empire in soft-spoken affirmations and high-end empathy. And for years, no one wanted to be the one to say, the Empress has no ethical wardrobe. Until Rogan and Kelly came along, lit the incense of accountability, and watched the illusion drift away in smoke. And now, after peeling back the layers of Oprah's empire, like an overpriced onion with a branding deal, what's left is the raw truth.